So what if I told you that your potential doesn't lie in your strengths? It lies somewhere that you're not looking. It lies in your blind spots. Well, that might bring up the question, well, how do I know where to look for if it's in my blind spots? I mean, that presupposes I'm blind to it. I don't know where to look for. What I'm going to share with you today is one of the most profound models that I've come across in my 20 years of working in the health and fitness space with over 10,000 people. It's called The Quadrants by Ken Wilber, and it's part of his integral theory body of work. And the powerful thing that I've found with the quadrants is that it includes everything, every perspective. Now, I cannot do it justice to explain it in 15 minutes, but I want to give you a one-on-one and some practical takeaways at the end. That means that you're able to go, I have a general understanding of this. I have a general understanding of where I might be missing and where my areas of growth are. And I have a general understanding of how I can go out into the real world and apply this straight away. So, there's a couple of things with this. This will land for a lot of individuals that they don't know what's holding them back, but they know what's holding them back. They're very, very good at doubling down on their strengths and doing more and more work, usually, or more and more thinking, or more planning, or more, let's say, connecting. But for some reason, they're still not breaking through to what they know they either A, ultimately want, or B, know what they're capable of. And when I learned this myself, let alone the hundreds of people that I've worked with through these quadrants, it became, first I was like, oh, okay, that kind of makes sense. And then the more that I understood it, and then the more that I saw it in the real world, so the more examples and opportunities I had to see it, I was just like, oh, fuck me, this is everywhere. I was not aware of this whatsoever at all. And if you've ever heard the term, the way you do one thing is the way you do everything, this model will explain to you what that fundamentally means. And so if you're interested in making sure that you're not going to be in the same spot in 12 months' time, that you can build out a plan of like, where do I need to focus and put my attention in order to grow the most, so that I can, move away from this idea, like this almost suckiness, and I'm saying like a vacuum suck of like this average mediocre life, just the norm, right? If you're wanting to prevent that and move towards this idea of being more present, being able to identify in the moment your strengths, your weaknesses, what you're missing, what other people are missing, then this framework will be able to teach you all of that. And so there's a couple of key, and whenever I present, I'm going to give you actually background here. Whenever I present, I'm like, what's the problem? What are we preventing? What's the outcome that we want? And then what's the process we have to go through? And the process includes three things. The first one is, what are the paradigms? So what are the mental shifts we have to make to be able to make the difference? And then what parts are involved, or what pillars are involved, components? And then what are the protocols or procedures that I have to run to be able to make those changes? That is literally how I do all of this. So first, we're going to start with principles. And so the principles you want to take on here is this idea that your potential lies in your blind spots. And so what that will do is help instigate you going, what am I actually missing? And in any given context, you can actually ask this question. If you're you can ask it of yourself, or you can ask it of others. If you're in a conversation with someone, maybe let's say it's in a workplace, and there's a disagreement of sorts, rather than doubling down on your point, you can actually say, can you help me with what I'm missing here? While still holding your point. It doesn't mean that you're wrong. What you're asking for is more information that you may not be seeing. Now, if you were to include that with your perspective, because a key principle of the quadrants is that they're true and partial, right? They are right and incomplete, which means your viewpoint is probably correct. It's just incomplete. It's missing some perspective. It's missing some type of information because of your strengths and biases. Hence, why the potential is all quadrants, always, your ability to be able to see all perspectives that I'm going to run through shortly, for that there being your potential and you being present is like, if that is where it exists, then you're going to be restricted by just having your strengths and leaning just on your strengths. And so when this came online for me, and what was really weak for me was probably action and doing, not probably, it was, and planning. And when I looked at those two things and I was like, right, I've never been good at spreadsheets. I've never been good at maybe I just need to think through this more. see if I can find a better way in my mind without actually just doing it and finding out. And when I learned that, I was like, hang on a sec, I need to run more experiments. I need to do more things and actually find out. Julian Pinau from StrongFit, he introduced me to the concept of burn the questions. So if you have questions, rather than sitting there and thinking and asking questions about it, go and do. Really good concept. We also run another concept called burn the beliefs. That's a whole nother thing. But for now, when we look at this, you got to understand that your potential lies in your blind spots, and that your strengths are also simultaneously your weakness, and preferences are biases. So your preferences are not truth, they are simply biases. And the more that we can question ourselves and understand why we actually preference certain things, the faster that we can actually stop. This is the beautiful quote by Carl Jung that says, do people have ideas or do ideas have people? You can swap that with many things. Do people have beliefs or do beliefs have people? Do those beliefs run those people? As in, they're almost like rules of engagement for that person with the outside world. And in the difficulty with this, and this is where beliefs and values come into play as an example, which we all have, it's not about, you want to be able to have beliefs and have values. Just don't let them have you and run your whole world. Your ability to question that is what allows us to be human at our very core, to question our thoughts and beliefs and values, to be able to adjust and change and grow and so forth. Otherwise, what was the age that you stopped and was like, that is it. These are the beliefs and values I must have for the rest of my life, and these are correct. It doesn't work like that. We're plastic, we're adaptable. And so your preferences are biases. So, the quadrants, what are they? Well, imagine literally quadrants, and you could draw this if you wanted to. You draw a square and then literally a line, an X and Y line. And in doing so, what you're going to write at the top is individual, at the bottom collective. Looking at it to the left is subjective or interior. And to the right is objective and external or exterior, right? And so what we start to see here is that we have an individual subjective. This is your first person perspective, your thoughts, your feelings, yourself, the way you see the world. The next one down, the bottom left, is your collective subjective. Now, all you need to know here is that this is a way of sharing or culture. This is shared value, shared meaning. And so, for example, with a gym that I've owned for many times, people will say, this is such a great community, which is a common unity. And what they're actually saying is it's a common unity of values. There's a common unity of care or respect or whatever the case might be. But in that culture, it is subjective. We cannot grab those values and put them in a wheelbarrow and take them anywhere. They are an intersubjective truth. And so you have your upper left quadrant, as in yourself, the way you see the world, your thoughts and feelings. We have a lower left quadrant, which is your collective values, the community. It is also unspoken assumptions. So some people have culture here that we don't talk, that we don't share values, and that's what we share. So if we don't talk, we share the truth, unspoken truth, that we assume of each other's thoughts. Interesting. Then we have the upper right, which is individual objective. This is body behavior. It's called way of doing. When I share these quadrants with someone and they go, what do I do with these? That is a third quadrant. It is a behavior question. What am I meant to do with this? Somebody who's dominant in the I space, the self space, is not going to ask that question. They're like, well, how do I make sense of this? Is how they approach it. Very, very different. And so what I'm going to teach you as we go through this is how you can actually start to hear for where people's strengths are and where their weaknesses are. And then the last one, the bottom right hand, is collective objective. This is the environment. This is the systems, planning, strategies. It's called way of checking, as in let's check things off like a checklist. And so now we have first person perspective, which is our worldview, a second person perspective, which is culture and a shared worldview. We then have a third person perspective, which is the physical body and behavior. And then we have a fourth person perspective, which is systems and environment. And so when we look at that and we look at this room right now, there is me sharing my worldview. There is a shared worldview of some degree between the two of us. And then there is my physical body and my behavior, my long hair, the way that I speak, all of that. And then there's also the environment, which is the camera, the microphone, that's all the books behind me. It's even the technology in the computer, the ability for it to, if you're driving, the car that you're in, it is everything else. And so now we see this is what's called integral theory. It's integrating every perspective. And so what happens within these 4 areas, we have one that we're strong in. It's called native. We have another one that we have access to, which means that, let's say, and this is true was true for me at least, my strength was my interior, so myself, my eye space, right? My way of seeing was my strength. And I had high access to way of sharing, which is why when I first started a business, it was about community. So much so that I would say to people, people want to be a part of something bigger than themselves. And I was talking about joining a force and being a force of good for a greater good as part of a community. But I sucked at the data stuff. I sucked at even the objectiveness of following a plan and looking at my finances, all that sort of stuff. So it was highlighted upon reflection, which is stuff that I've spent so much time working on now, which has allowed me to get even better at the stuff that I've been exceptional at from a young age. And so we have a native, we have access, then we have a quadrant that we're longing for. And you hear that in people's language and they're like, I've been really trying to take care of myself. I've been really wanting to go on a holiday. I've been really wishing that they would bring it up with me. I've had thoughts of maybe doing, a retreat for myself, whatever the case might be. The longing language is showing you a quadrant that person doesn't have access to and is aware of that and wants that. And so commonly in a coaching space, people actually come into coaching because of their longing. Now, here's the real funny thing is that they try and get to their longing quadrant, connection or self-awareness or, physical activity or systems. They try and get to one of those quadrants by their strength. Here's an example. Let's say somebody has struggles with their mental health, their anxiousness, so to speak. Your anxiousness has so much to do with your, what's called upper left, your subjective experience of the world, your thoughts, feelings, how you construct your thinking. And people that don't know how to ground their thinking, that don't have awareness of how they structure that, they think it just happens, right? Thoughts just occur and their thoughts own them. They go, I exercise. And when I exercise, I feel better and I get rid of anxiety. And what's really happening is that they're just flogging themselves mostly into like a fight or flight state where you can't think about the dooming tax coming or what people might think of you or anything like that at all. And so it alleviates their anxiety for the moment. But a real integral approach to anxiousness is we're looking at, okay, am I moving my body? Yes, of course, 100% that's important. Am I aware of how I structure my thinking and the beliefs that I believe? Am I aware of the people that I'm spending time with? And what are the systems and environments that I'm setting myself up in and that I live in? And when we take an integral approach to anxiousness there, now we start to go, hang on a sec, I've been attempting to fix what is an integral problem from just my strength quadrant. And then what happens is they keep exercising, injure themselves, and then they've got this real big mental health load that they can't deal with because they don't know how to actually understand and unpack the structure of their thinking. That is why this is so important. So, run through that again. You've got a native, a strength, and you've got one that you've got access to. Then you have one that you're longing for, and then the last one's a blind spot. I have a buddy and he's a PT and he had a young guy come in and the young guy came in and his mum was paying for him and he was kind of shortcutting reps and didn't really want to train, didn't have energy. He was like, oh, okay. He was 17. And my buddy who's a PT is like, I don't know what's wrong with him. I wish my mum paid for me, right? Can you hear the eye, right? The way of seeing. I wish my mum paid for me to have a PT when I was 17. That would have saved me heaps of time. So I don't know what's wrong with him. And I said, have you asked him if he, why he does that or if he wants to do it? And then his response was, well, I don't see the point of pulling at threads. This guy is so not aware of a second quadrant. He's blocked. I'm just going to, in his family, from my experience, They didn't talk. They assumed everyone's intentions. And they got pretty good at it, but they never actually understood the other person's intention or why, because they were so used to not talking and just guessing. And so their second quadrant is not online. And so he attempts to do the second quadrant through the other quadrants. So the second quadrant being the we space, the community, the sharing, right? I actually call it check in. So if your fourth, the systems, is checking, then your second, as in the culture, is check in. And it can literally be, let me just check in with you. What do you mean by X? That is how we actually unpack a second quadrant. Anyway, so there's an example of someone who has just blind on one of the quadrants. So that's a quick overview of Quadrants 101, how you can use it. What I'm going to do is give you a couple of examples and protocols that you can use today to start getting a better understanding of how to not just lean into your potential, but also hear this in other people. So firstly, what I would encourage you to do is become aware of your language. If you can just bring awareness to it, don't try and change it, anything at all, just bring awareness to it. And start becoming aware of how often you use the words I, me, my. When you mean I, me, my. It's also looking at things like saying you or it instead of I, or it's just what you do. So you actually hear athletes. I hear athletes at least. I just did it then. You actually hear athletes. I hear athletes at least. I hear athletes go, well, it's just what needed to be done. So it feels good to do what you need to do for your team. All of that language is objective. None of it was, I feel really good about getting it done and doing it. And I feel really good for contributing to the team, and I hope to continue to contribute to the team. They don't say that. They're like, I chose to really dig in at that time. They're just like, that's what you need. It's factual. It runs them. It's probably one of the reasons why they're phenomenal at what they do. But there's actually not a whole lot of ownership in it, almost like it runs through them. And so the first thing is becoming aware of your own language. And it's called quadrant hygiene. Do I mean I, me, my? When I say we, our, us, that is the second quadrant. So we, our, us is when I say, oh, well, we think this. It's like, when was the last time you checked in with everyone? Is it actually a we? Have you ever had, like, maybe you're a teacher or you know a teacher or something, and you can imagine one of the parents comes up and goes, oh, we think that this needs to change. It's like, who's we? It's like, oh, all the parents. Can you name them for me? Well, there's a group of us. How big is the group? Well, there's like, in the group chat, there's like 10, 15 people. Well, 10 and 15 are two different numbers. So how many people are in there? It's like, well, it's 10. Okay. And who were the people that agreed with you? Like, who's the people that you said it? Well, it was Shelley and I. So it's like, it's two people. And Shelley disagrees with you anyway. She's a type 9 peacemaker on the Enneagram, which means that she just is happy to go with the flow because she don't want to rock the boat. So what we start to do here is like, what does we actually mean? So really start to listen for the language I, me, my, for me, first person, we, our, us, for second person. And then we start to move into the it's, you, y'all, depending where you are, is all within the third and fourth quadrant as well. So that's one. And now on top of that, you start to listen for what people are actually saying. Are they dominantly talking about themselves? Do they dominantly talk about other people? Do they dominantly talk about activities and doing? Do they dominantly talk about systems and environment? And I'm going to give you a quick example. I don't know why I had that little Family Guy whistle there, but quick example. My father-in-law, who's a fantastic man, he's an electrical engineer, communications engineer. His interest in things and the world is through the roof. Through the roof. In every single conversation, it is around how things work and how things work together and how things fit, which fourth quadrant's also functional fit, which is funny because that's my business name. But how things fit. And like, he'll watch documentaries on ships. He'll talk about the communications of, we're out on a 5-acre property, so how the internet works different out there compared to somewhere else. We've ordered a car at the moment, and so he's talking about the delays and the shipping delays and the potential rolling over of the truck on the way. All of it's all fourth quadrant. But that's what an engineer does. They're looking at fourth quadrant. They're not poets. Poets are heavily first quadrant. And so really start to listen for what is this person talking about. It'll give you an indication of their strength. Now, here's the kicker, and this is what I'm going to leave you with, is that if you can listen through the quadrants, not only are you hearing their strength, but you can also then start to ask questions about what you're not hearing. And that's where the power of this massively lays. You can start to go, so I'm hearing a lot about the outside world and how things fit together. Have you spoken to Shelley about this? Because I haven't heard anything about the people involved in the conversation that have happened there. And they might go, well, what's the point of speaking to Shelley about it? They're just going to have to do it anyway. And so there is a complete either blind spot. I don't hear a longing in that. It's an example of going, what am I hearing and what am I not hearing? Because listening is not just what people are saying. Don't get lost on the story. Listen for the structure. And then you can lean in and ask questions about what you're not hearing. And that is one of the most powerful things that you can do with this model. And before I finish, I'll share a question that you can ask. If someone's just been on holiday, but you can also do it for the weekend, you're like, how was your holiday? And then listen to what they say. Right? How is your weekend? Don't ask, what did you do? Because that's the third quadrant question. It's a doing question. Ask, how was your weekend? And then hear what they come back with and start to listen. So whenever you ask questions, truly listen for the structure of what they're saying. Sometimes you'll get lost. Don't worry about it. You don't get this or not get this. It is a skill to develop over time. But that is a Quadrants 101. If you're part of the Flow community, I've got a masterclass coming up on that. Otherwise, I'm out. There's links in all the descriptions below if you want to do free trainings. There's a generational health quiz. I'm still getting better at these outros, so bear with me. But either way, there's a heap of free resources there and some paid ones. But that's me done. I'm out. Until next time, peace and pizza. I'll see you soon.